In the heart of the bustling metropolis, the transition between the affluent business district and the modest residential areas was marked by a stark contrast. In architecture and atmosphere, it was in this transitional zone that Samuel Wright, a seasoned police officer, with over 15 years on the force, chose to patrol the evening was settling in, casting long shadows over the streets. As Samuel drove his patrol car along the boundary line, Samuel was known among his peers for his strict adherence to law and order. His belief in maintaining peace was unwavering, but it often blurred with his personal biases, shaped by years of encounters that colored his perceptions of different neighborhoods and their residents. Today, his attention was caught by a sleek, high-end sports car, cruising smoothly through a less affluent part of town. The car's luxurious appearance was out of place. Among the modest family sedans and aged, compact cars, behind the wheel was Diana Ross, a federal prosecutor known for her sharp mind and unyielding dedication to justice. Unknown to Samuel, Diana was returning from a community outreach program aimed at bridging the gap between law enforcement and urban communities. Her involvement in these programs stemmed from her commitment to not only uphold the law, but also to foster understanding and cooperation between the police and the public. As Diana's car stopped at a red light, Samuel pulled up behind her, observing through the tinted windows. His suspicions grew. His years of patrolling had instilled a sense of skepticism about luxury cars in modest neighborhoods. Deciding to investigate, he waited for the light to change before signaling her to pull over. Diana complied, pulling her car to the curb smoothly. She remained calm, gathering her license and registration as she watched Samuel approach in her rearview mirror. The evening air was cool, and as Samuel reached her window, he could sense the calm professionalism about her. However, his preconceived notions made him wary of her composed demeanor. "Good evening, ma'am. License and registration, please." Samuel's voice was firm, his expression unreadable. Behind his sunglasses, Diana handed over her documents without a word, her face betraying no emotion. She knew this routine all too well. As a black woman in America, she had faced similar situations, more times than she cared to count. But her position afforded her a perspective that few could claim. Samuel took the documents and scanned them quickly. "What brings you to this part of town?" he asked, trying to gauge her reaction. Diana's response was calm and direct. "I'm returning from a community program. I work as a federal prosecutor, and part of my job is to engage with different communities to enhance mutual understanding." Taken aback by her calm assertion and her high-ranking legal role, Samuel's demeanor shifted slightly. He handed back her documents, his mind racing with the implications of her position. This traffic stop, he realized, was not going to be as straightforward as he had assumed. Samuel returned Diana's documents, but didn't step away. His training and instincts still urged him to push further, despite the rational part of his mind, suggesting he tread carefully. Given her position, "Is there anything in the vehicle I should know about?" he asked, peering into her car with a scrutinizing look. Diana sensed the tension escalating. "Officer Wright, I assure you, everything about my vehicle and my presence here is legal. And in order, you have no grounds to detain me." Her voice was firm yet composed, showing no sign of agitation. Samuel, feeling the challenge to his authority, decided to insist on a vehicle search, citing protocol for traffic stops in high-crime areas. Despite the fact that Diana had given him no real cause for suspicion. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," he stated reluctantly. Diana complied, stepping out into the cool evening air as she did. Samuel called for backup standard procedure for what he considered a high-risk situation. Diana stood by her car, arms folded, watching as another patrol car pulled up. The backup officer, a young woman named Officer Jenkins, arrived and quickly sensed the tension. "What's the situation, Sam?" she inquired, her gaze shifting between Samuel and Diana. Samuel explained his reasoning for the stop and his decision to search the vehicle. Officer Jenkins listened, then turned to Diana. "Ma'am, I'm going to observe the search." "Officer Wright, please proceed." As Samuel began the search, Diana watched calmly, her confidence in her legal position clear. The search turned up nothing incriminating. No surprise to Diana, but a growing frustration to Samuel. He realized his actions were bordering on harassment and could have professional repercussions. After a thorough but fruitless search, Samuel stood by Diana's vehicle, the weight of the situation sinking in. He had acted on a bias, and now he was standing on shaky legal ground. "Ma'am, you are free to go," he finally said, his voice betraying a hint of embarrassment. Diana nodded, taking a moment to compose herself before she responded. "Officer Wright, I hope this incident can be a learning opportunity. I respect the challenges of your job, but it is essential to exercise that authority fairly and without prejudice." She got back into her car without waiting for a reply and drove off, leaving Samuel and Officer Jenkins by the roadside. Jenkins looked at Samuel with a mix of concern and disappointment. "Sam, we need to talk about this." "Let's head back." Back at the precinct, the air was tense as Samuel and Officer Jenkins debriefed with their captain. The details of the traffic stop were laid out, and Samuel explained his rationale with a slight defensiveness in his voice. However, the captain was not pleased. "You let your assumptions guide your actions, right? That's not how we do things here, especially not with someone of her stature," the captain reprimanded, feeling the weight of his mistake. Samuel spent a restless night, replaying the evening's events. The next morning, he learned that Diana had filed a formal complaint against him, citing an abuse of power and racial profiling. This escalated the situation, prompting an internal investigation. Samuel was put on desk duty pending the outcome, a move that stung his pride, but gave him time to reflect on his actions. Meanwhile, Diana prepared for the upcoming hearing. With meticulous attention to detail, she gathered statements from witnesses who had seen the stop and worked with a lawyer to compile evidence of Samuel's history of similar stops. Her goal was not just to clear her name, but to spark a broader conversation about biases within law enforcement. The hearing was scheduled quickly, due to the high-profile nature of the case. As the day approached, Samuel felt a mix of anxiety and a dawning realization that he needed to make amends, not just for his career, but for his understanding of justice. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was filled with law enforcement officers, media, and community members. Diana stood confidently, her presence commanding attention. She presented her case clearly, outlining the unwarranted stop and how it was representative of a deeper, systemic issue. She used the incident as a platform to discuss the need for substantial reforms within the police department. Samuel listened his initial defensiveness, giving way to a grudging respect for Diana's eloquence and the clarity of her arguments. It was becoming clear to him that this hearing was not just about a traffic stop. It was about challenging the status quo and initiating change. As Diana concluded her initial remarks and prepared to call her first witness, Samuel's thoughts were in turmoil. He realized that whatever the outcome, his perspective on policing and on his own biases had already begun to shift. As the hearing progressed, the courtroom atmosphere thickened with tension and anticipation. Diana methodically presented her evidence, calling witnesses who corroborated the unnecessary nature of the traffic stop and highlighting patterns in Samuel's past conduct that suggested racial profiling. One after another, the witnesses, a mix of former defendants and experts in law enforcement practices, described similar experiences with Samuel, painting a picture of a pattern of behavior that undermined trust in the police force. Each testimony built on the last, creating a compelling argument for systemic change. Samuel, sitting at the defense table, felt a growing discomfort. It was one thing to face accusations in private, but another to see his actions laid bare. In such a public and formal setting, the weight of the evidence was undeniable, and he could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him, including those of his colleagues. When it was his turn to speak, Samuel stood up, his legs feeling strangely heavy. His voice faltered as he began. "I've always tried to do my job to the best of my ability, but I realize now that my judgment may have been clouded by biases." I wasn't fully aware of. Diana listened intently, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. She asked pointed questions that forced Samuel to confront the reality of his actions and their impact on the community. "Isn't it true, Officer Wright, that your decision to stop Miss Ross was influenced more by her race and the type of vehicle she was driving than any actual suspicion of wrongdoing?" Samuel swallowed hard before responding, "Yes, that seems to be the case. I regret that. My actions have contributed to the distrust between the community and the police." The judge, a stern woman with decades on the bench, nodded slowly as she took notes. The room was silent, except for the soft clicking of her pen. After Samuel's admission, she called for a short recess before the final statements. During the break, Samuel approached Diana. His expression was one of genuine remorse. "Miss Ross, I want to apologize directly to you. I've learned a painful lesson today about the consequences of unchecked biases. I am committed to doing better." Diana regarded him for a moment before responding. "Apology accepted, Officer Wright. I appreciate your willingness to reflect and change. This isn't just about you or me. It's about how we all move forward together." As the recess ended and the courtroom settled again, Diana prepared her closing remarks, focusing on the need for accountability and transparency in policing. The judge listened intently, aware that the outcome of this hearing could have far-reaching implications for the community and the police department. The courtroom resumed its quiet hum as Diana Ross prepared to deliver her closing remarks. She stood clearing her throat slightly, commanding the room's full attention. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, today we have seen clear evidence that not only was my stop by Officer Wright unwarranted, but it also reflects deeper, systemic issues that we must address." Diana continued, her voice steady and persuasive. "We are at a critical point where we must decide whether we are going to perpetuate a culture of mistrust and bias or take bold steps towards reform and accountability. This case is about more than just one traffic stop. It's about our commitment to justice and equality." As she spoke, Diana outlined proposals for training, programs aimed at reducing racial bias and improving community relations. She called for transparent procedures that would allow citizens to feel safe and respected by law enforcement. It is essential that the police department not only revises its policies, but also ensures that these policies are implemented effectively and consistently. The judge listened intently, nodding occasionally after Diana concluded. The judge took a moment before speaking. "This has been a compelling testimony, and it is clear that changes are necessary. I will take all that has been said under advisement before making a ruling." Samuel Wright felt a mix of relief and apprehension. He knew that regardless of the judge's decision, his own journey towards change had already begun. He had listened to each word Diana said, feeling the truth of her statements resonate with his newfound understanding of his biases. The judge called for a final recess before delivering her decision. During this time, Samuel approached Diana once again. "Regardless of the outcome, I want to thank you for pushing me to confront uncomfortable truths. I am committed to being part of the change." Diana nodded, acknowledging his effort. "Change begins with acknowledgement. Officer Wright, I hope today marks a new chapter for us all." When the court reconvened, the judge delivered her verdict. "Given the evidence presented, I find that the stop made by Officer Wright was indeed based on improper grounds. Moreover, I am recommending that the police department undertakes a comprehensive review of its training and policies concerning racial bias." The courtroom erupted in a low murmur. As the judge continued, "I am also ordering that Officer Wright undergo additional training on racial bias and community relations. This case serves as a reminder of our duty to uphold justice without prejudice." Following the judge's ruling, the atmosphere in the courtroom was one of cautious optimism. Many who had followed the case felt a mix of relief and hoped that this might herald real change within the local police department. Diana's efforts had not only highlighted the issues of racial bias, but had also set the stage for future reforms. In the weeks after the hearing, the police department began to implement the changes ordered by the court. Samuel attended the additional training on racial bias and community relations, where he was exposed to various perspectives that challenged and ultimately began to change his views on policing. He participated actively, engaging with the material and his peers in discussions that were often uncomfortable but necessary for growth. Diana, meanwhile, continued her advocacy work, speaking at community forums and workshops about the importance of accountability in law enforcement. Her case had become a benchmark for other departments facing similar scrutiny, and she was invited to consult on reform strategies in other cities. As part of the resolution process, Samuel and Diana were asked to participate in a joint community outreach program. This initiative was designed to rebuild trust between the police and the community. They served together. They attended town hall meetings, where they shared their experiences from the case and discussed the steps being taken to ensure fair and unbiased policing. The collaboration was challenging at first, with skepticism on both sides. However, as they continued to work together, a mutual respect developed. Samuel's sincere efforts to understand and rectify his previous misconceptions won him cautious respect from community members who had previously distrusted the police. Months later, the police department reported a significant decrease in complaints regarding racial bias. The training programs were being credited with helping to foster a culture of understanding and respect within the department. Samuel had become an advocate for the training, sharing his personal journey of transformation with new recruits and fellow officers. As Diana watched the slow, but positive, transformation within the police department, she felt a cautious optimism. She knew that change was often slow in the path to reform fraud with challenges, but she also recognized that the efforts made could lead to lasting improvements. The story of Diana and Samuel had started with conflict, but ended with collaboration and hope. Their journey underscored the importance of confronting uncomfortable truths and working together to forge a path forward. It was a reminder that change is possible when individuals commit to self-reflection and when communities demand accountability. This story teaches us the importance of confronting our biases and the impact they can have, not just on individuals, but on the community as a whole. Samuel's journey from a place of defense to one of understanding and change is a powerful reminder that personal growth is possible and essential for societal progress. If this story resonated with you or sparked a thought about how we can collectively improve fairness and understanding within our communities, please engage with us. Subscribe to our channel, Daily Stories #1, for more inspiring tales and discussions that challenge and change our perceptions. Share this story and your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about how we can all contribute to building a more just and inclusive society. Your voice matters, and together we can make a difference.